Welcome to my whole body approach series, and where today I'm going to be talking about the foot. So this is where I'm going to be picking a different body part each week, and I'm going to be sharing how it's related to your whole body. So last week I talked about how the knee was impacted by the joints above and below, so the knee and the hips, and how important it was to really activate not just your quads but also your hamstrings, and how the huge impact the foot had on the function and the health of your knee. I believe the major function for the foot is the ability to actually shock absorb. And it does that because of all the little bones that makes up the foot. So whenever you walk, whenever you go against gravity, run, jump, these bones basically collapse, or what people call pronation. And then they have to unpronate and become rigid in order to propel your body forward. So if you're walking, it's gonna collapse during a loading phase, and as you push off, it's gonna basically what they call supination, or it becomes rigid and your body is able to push off and propel. So that happens whether you're jumping, you're loading, now collapsing, and then rigid, you're jumping off. So constantly it has to happen. So the dysfunction or injury happens is when it collapses because the ligaments have gotten loose, and it never resupinates, it never becomes rigid again. And when that happens, a common injury that is caused is plantar fasciitis. It's basically the ligaments and the muscles, tendons on the bottom of your feet get inflamed, and it's very painful. And it often is most painful when you first wake up at night after you've been in bed and those muscles have recontracted. So it takes, like, your first step out of bed is really painful because those muscles are so tight. And that's why a conventional treatment for that is people will take a golf ball and try to massage their feet by rolling on the golf ball, okay? And that releases a tissue and can manage some of the symptoms. However, this will be a continued problem unless you fix some of the other root causes. And some of those causes could be ankle tightness, so your calves may be tight. So if your calves and hamstrings are tight, then what it does is it forces the bottom of your foot to have to stretch more. So if I'm taking a step, and notice how my ankle, this angulation has to decrease, so see how but this muscle has to lengthen as I'm stepping over. Now that muscle is like a lever, so if you imagine a string from here that goes all the way down, if I do this, that string doesn't have to be as long. But if I step over, that's got to stretch. So if your calves are not stretchy enough, then this bottom has to stretch more, and it gets overstretched. So if you're only rolling on a golf ball, you're only looking at the symptom. You're not looking at the chain up, the root cause. And actually, most of the time what we find at G3 Physical Therapy is that the root cause can even be up here in the hip when you have tight hips. So when you have tight hips, you can't access your ankle. Or if you have tight ankles, you can't access your hip. So that's where a lot of runners, a lot of people that have back pain, it's really having that ankle calf mobility that's really good, or hip mobility, that's gonna basically impact each other. I feel like it's a ping pong effect. You're just bouncing back and forth, trying to chase like your pain and trying to fix your symptoms. But really, if you just did a couple stretches, that helps both. So last week, we did a stretch where we did this simple thing where we step back. It's called a posterior lunge, but really we're lengthening the front of the leg and allowing that hamstring and calf to lengthen. That is hugely helpful. Or what we also teach is that we teach you how to stretch your calves in a dynamic three-dimensional way. So instead of just stretching your calves, just holding it for 30 seconds, we actually have you move in different directions, because the calf muscle actually attaches on above the knee on either side. So it angles up like a V. So if you don't angle your stretches, then you're not getting the whole calf, you're only getting a part of it. So that's a huge key component of how to help your plantar fasciitis, but to also help the overall function of your body. One thing that's super important that I want to mention is that, remember all those little bones that I talk about and how they unlock and how they pronate? Well, part of that is that because when you do that, your knee also goes in. So as your foot pronates, it unlocks your ankles and it unlocks your knees and it unlocks your hips, so that you can be like a spiral, like a spring. So it helps you collapse and load so that you can spring up and unload. Okay, so and whenever you do that, it actually lengthens all your muscles. So it's like a rubber band that gets stretched and you can let go, so to have more power. So that's why it's so important to have mobile ankles and mobile feet. And to also be careful that sometimes when you get orthotics, they actually they give you too much support. So it's actually kind of tricky to get the exact orthotics that will both support you but also allow motion. Okay, so a quick review is that just know that if you have plantar fasciitis or knee pain, that maybe it's because you have tight calves or a tight hip. Number two is that it's so important to understand that your foot is supposed to collapse and pronate. But the problem is that if it stays there and it can't come out of it, then you may be overstretching that plantar fascia or causing too much pressure in the little joints in your bones. And the third thing is to know that you're supposed to unlock and load and explode. So whenever there is tightness, then you're not allowing that shock absorption to happen, that load to happen. So that can lead into not only plantar fasciitis, but knee pain, hip pain, and even lower back pain. So this is why the whole body approach is so important, and why it's important to learn how to do the multi-directional calf stretches, the hamstring stretches, and next week I'm going to be talking about the hip. So I'm going to go into actually how to do a hip flexor stretch in a three-dimensional dynamic way. So I hope this was helpful, and please comment below, ask lots of questions. And so I'm here for you, and I want to help guide you into basically being able to stay active for your whole entire life, and be able to free to do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. So thanks a lot. See you soon.